We pretend not to need them to call and check in on us when we are late to get home. We pretend not to need the display of love, like flowers or a date night or a gift. We pretend not to need our birthdays and anniversaries to be deliberately and specially commemorated. Whatever you are scared to lose might be the very reason that you lose yourself. And I think that thought came to me because it's paradoxical, and I like paradoxes, right? But it's to emphasize that paradoxical nature of attachment and fear in our lives. So there is sometimes an intense fear that we have about losing something, losing someone, and that leads us to certain behaviors and decisions that ultimately result in us losing ourselves. And self-loss is always the greatest thing to lose, because we have nothing except ourselves. And if in the process of trying to build relationships, build our career, build social status, build financial wealth, we are constantly choosing the other thing, the other job, the other person, versus or instead of ourselves, ultimately we lose the most valuable thing and the only thing we could ever truly own, which is me. And that's always to our detriment. So here's what that could look like if you're thinking about your relationships. If you have a relationship that could probably be considered codependent, one of the things that can happen for you in a romantic sense is that because you've developed an intense fear of losing the relationship with the partner, of losing the love, of losing the intimacy, of losing all the things that come along with the relationship. Because of that fear, we pretend not to need things. We pretend not to need them to call and check in on us when we are late to get home. We pretend not to need the spontaneous display of love, like flowers or a date night or a gift. We pretend not to need our birthdays and anniversaries to be deliberately and specially commemorated. We pretend not to need the thank you. We pretend not to need the apology. We pretend that we don't need the values to align. So they believe in one thing, we believe in something that is completely different, in fact, an opposing thing, and we just pretend that that's not important. That's not a core value for me. I'm willing to be flexible. I'm willing to ignore that. I don't like dishonesty, that I don't like lying, that I don't like cheating, because if this is what they want to offer, I'm going to pretend that this is enough for me. And so we ignore the actual needs that we have to feel safe in our relationships, to feel heard in our relationships, to have a regular and deep communication and conversation in said relationships, to be cared for, to be respected, and to have even shared interests, just so we can keep that relationship intact. And so ultimately what happens over time is that we lose our sense of self-identity because we continue to prioritize the partner's happiness over our own because we're afraid to lose them. That puts us in a space of emotional and psychological distress. So you can find that showing up in marriages, for example, where the wife or the husband is giving up themselves in order to stay in the relationship with this other person. And the emotional distress, the frustration, the resentment that is built up that they can never express to the partner and will never confront inside themselves is poured onto the children. It comes out at work with a short temper, with missed deadlines, with rude language and behavior, because that has to come out at some point. And the longer we spend suppressing it and the longer we spend pretending that it's not a problem, is the further and further away we step from ourselves. So there are 3 principles that I'm inviting you to consider. Maybe all 3 are relevant to where you are now. Maybe just one of the 3 can serve you where you are. But there's also a possibility that you're not in a shedding season and you probably have to come back to this another month because no, this is not where you are. But the first of the 3 principles is the principle of letting go. And ultimately, that is what the fall season represents. The falling of the leaves, the changing of the colors is a reminder that nature knows every single year. There's a point in this year, no matter how much I've invested in growing this tree, in sprouting these leaves, in giving out these blossoms for spring and for summer, we have to accept that these leaves are going to go. And when it's time for them to go, we don't see the trees holding on to the leaves for dear life. So when the leaves start to change color from green, look at nature, how she just allows the leaves to fall, to drop to the ground. She's not in this constant state of bending down and contorting herself as an oak tree, as a apple tree, as a pear tree, to lean over and pick them up and try to stick them back on, because maybe if nobody looks closely enough, they won't see that these leaves were not supposed to be on me in the first place. There is no pretense in nature. When something has ended in a cycle, when it has served its purpose for the season, nature is so absolutely grateful in allowing the past to pass. And for the time that the leaves were on, it was beautiful. It added so much light. It was vibrant in the space. The bees and the birds had a whale of a time, pollinating, having the fruits, and really enjoying the scenery of the colorfulness in spring and summer. But when that season is done, nature is graceful in letting it go. It's not chasing the leaves as they fall, trying to catch them back, trying to paste them back on. In fact, one of the beautiful things about the process of the leaves falling is that as they fall to the root of the tree, those leaves disintegrate and go back into the soil of that very same tree and become nutrients. What does that mean for us? When we allow things that no longer serve us to come off, to drop our ground, to die, to disintegrate, what we are saying is that served me for a season. The season is done. And these are the things that I can extract from that as it leaves my space. The lesson, the nutrient that is going back into the soil, and the value, knowing that even though it's gone, I never fully lose it, right? And it's never fully disappearing from me. There's a quote that the past doesn't really pass. It's always still here. And you can think about it, not to say we don't release things and we keep everything on our back, but sometimes it's our very scars that serve as a reminder that we went through certain things. So you look on your hand, I have a scar on my wrist, and I'm reminded of a time when I was not so careful with a sharp implement and cut myself. So it tells me that I went through this experience, and this experience was very real. I'm not making it up. The pain is not fake. The struggle in that season was not pretentious. I actually experienced this. But this is the lesson. I'm not walking around with this open wound. I'm not pretending that the wound does not exist. I allow it to heal, and I acknowledge that it is simply a reminder of what I went through and the lesson that that season and that experience was supposed to teach me. So the leaf falling to the root of the tree and essentially not dying, but going back in to give life and nutrients and support to that tree is a powerful reminder to us that even when somebody has to leave, or we have to leave somebody, there is something that is permanent in the experience we've had with them, through the memories, through the shared growth, through the experiences that stretched each of us, whether it's in a work relationship, a friendship, or in an intimate relationship. There's some things that never actually die, even if the relationship comes to an end. So don't worry too much about losing as you're letting go. You can let go and still preserve the value, the lessons, the blessings, and the nutrients from whatever leaves are falling off your tree. So I'm inviting you on this particular principle, letting go and doing so with grace, as nature often teaches us. I want you to consider old habits that might need to be shed, any negative thought patterns that may need to be confronted and abandoned, any toxic relationship that still exists that is hindering your personal growth. Think on it. And it's actually something I'm going to do today. Have my trusty journal. Think on it and ask yourself, as you're reflecting, what you've outgrown and what you need to, or probably already have developed the courage to release, how you need to create space for fresh opportunities and new experiences. And this is the precise question. What habits or relationships no longer serve me? What habits, thought patterns, or relationships no longer serve me?